Now, as we dig into the issues on the right side of this political spectrum, and we're joined in the studio today by Michael Kliener, the president of the Likud Party Supreme Court and a former Israeli parliament member of the Likud. Thanks for joining us. Jeremy Saltan, thanks for joining us as well, a candidate on the Jewish Home Party list this time around, and a long time Yamina activist, and obviously been involved in politics for a while, Jeremy, as well. So both of you, thanks for joining. I want to begin starting out with the latest news here. I mean, before we get to Smotrich himself, and I want to come to you first on this, Michael, coming from the Likud. What's going on here with Netanyahu these days? I mean, now denying this, claiming that he never credibly tried to get the Ram party in. I mean, Smotrich at the time, it was widely reported to have backed away from that possible government because of those overtures. And in fact, it was those overtures that opened the door for legitimacy, for Lapid to approach the Ram party and ultimately include them in a government. What's Netanyahu? How can he spin this now? What's happening here?
Look, they don't have real arguments against Netanyahu, so they try to find old recordings that are true. By the way, I believe that Netanyahu was right by trying to form a coalition with Ram. Yeah. I believe Bezalel Smotrich did a very wrong thing for the wrong reasons when he was the one who actually torpedoed a Likud government, and actually by opposing coalition with Ram, Bezalel Smotrich is the culprit, who is responsible for having this very bad government we had for the last years. Not Bennett, not Ayelet Shaked, Smotrich.
I mean, that could be, but...
He, by the way, in an interview to Makor Rishon, he admitted it on Friday. He said, I was the one, by opposing Ram, who prevented the Netanyahu government.
I mean, but you could argue he stood by his ideals. What's Netanyahu doing now? Denying that he ever did this? Does that hurt you?
Look, Netanyahu...
Does that hurt him in your eyes?
He sticks to a formality that he spoke about personal election, because the form that it was presented was that Ram will abstain, because otherwise Smotrich would have not agreed. We believed, everybody believed, also Ayelet Shaked believed, that Smotrich will swallow an arrangement where Ram is there, for example, and not attending or something like that, and supporting a bill that the Prime Minister will be elected by the public. Everybody knows that in an election directly before the public, Netanyahu would have been elected. So these are technicalities. Okay. Netanyahu wanted Ram. Netanyahu legitimized Ram. And I tell you more, it was a good thing for Israel that Ram was a part of the coalition, because Mansour Abbas was the first Arab leader in Arab history for 100 years that accepts Israel as a Jewish state, and all his behavior was one that we dreamed that one day it will happen. So I believe Ram should be in every coalition.
You know, here Netanyahu,
I'm just enjoying this so much.
I mean, obviously, I agree with the Ram points here, but the Netanyahu factor, which is hard to wrap our heads around now, that he's standing by that this never happened. It's fake news, essentially. Does this harm his credibility in some way, or are his voters just so entrenched at this point? It doesn't
honestly, I don't think people who vote for Netanyahu and the Likud care about his credibility at this point. He's turned this into some sort of a culture war where he's the victim and he expects everyone to rise to the occasion and support him. And look, it's working really well for him. If you're looking at the map, he's the largest party, so you should give him credit. But I actually think when going back to that recording we heard from Smotrich, I actually think that was a Likud leak. I think this is Netanyahu's response to try to get back those voters that he's been losing to Ben Gvir and Smotrich, especially after that Kfar Chabad stage incident where he refused to be on the same stage with Ben Gvir. He was afraid to look as too extreme with the two of them being on the same stage. And here he's trying to harm Smotrich's credibility in order to try to bring people back to the Likud.
So you don't think Smotrich has anything to do with this? That this was something basically thrown on Smotrich right now?
I really think this was a Likud campaign point. You always have to look after one of these gaffes. Who ends up winning as a result of the leak? When you see wherever the votes go, that's where you see the person who happened to leak it.
Michael, who does win from this Smotrich leak? I mean, does this, we're left to wonder a bit, how does this affect the game or at all, or who did this, or why, or what's happening behind this leak now with Smotrich? Do you agree with Jeremy?
Indeed, I would have wished I would have agreed with Jeremy. I believe it is damaging, not in a big extent. It's damaging Smotrich, and with this, Jeremy is correct, because people who are Likud, who tended to vote for Ben Gvir, are angry now and furious at this leak, so they may come back and vote Likud. On the other hand, it hurts the credibility of Netanyahu portrays once again as somebody who doesn't tell the whole truth, and I am delicate because it's election time. And so this can make some marginal damage to the Likud in the center, where it's where we don't want to lose votes to bad directions, not to Marzel, not to Ben Gvir or Smotrich.
About a minute left here before we got to break, and we'll hold on to both of you to continue this discussion afterwards. But on this, so much action on the threshold, Jeremy. I mean, this is now, it all matters on the thresholds, on the margins. The smaller parties are make or breaking all these elections, and we can get into that subject when we come back. Is this therefore really important? Whatever happens with Smotrich, whatever happens with Ben Gvir, anyone that's in these smaller parties that appear to be the kingmakers at this point.
Well, I don't think the difference between Smotrich and Likud is going to have anything to do with the threshold.
Okay.
When it comes to the Bayit Yehudi party, though, obviously there's a lot of interest. I can tell you in our internal polls we're at 6 seats when we ask who would you vote for if there was no threshold. And I think if you look at the old party machines and the municipal representatives that we have, the 35 mayors that are endorsing the party, that's something that's helpful when you get to the get out the vote stuff on election day that you wouldn't see in the polls.
Both of you hold on to this here. We're going to come back and discuss some more issues on the right and certainly on the thresholds here, where it appears, once again, the action will be decided. But we're stepping out for a short break here on Zoom In. Right back. 2 minutes, though. Stay with us. Much more.
Just want answers on our essence, right? Linear points in time, past, present, future, and you should see the present as a present. But maybe the now is not a snapshot, but an entire film. Identity is not a prefix that is derived from interaction, from the ever-dynamic connections we're making. You can only go so far from the lens of the individual. The only way to grasp the greater world, you need to engage in discourse, global eye, where it's not about the being, but about the becoming.
Imagine being able to see into the future.
What innovations will change the world as we know it? Join us as we meet the people changing our planet and discover the inventions shaping tomorrow.
Israel Business Beat, Sundays and Wednesdays, 9:30 p.m. GMT.
Join us for a magnificent inside look at the Bedouin community in the Holy Land. Did you know they are a nomadic culture? We'll learn about their customs, traditions, and skills. Plus, we'll take a tracking tour in the field to learn how to navigate in the desert without using any technology. We'll also take you to a modern-day Bedouin art exhibition. Watch Holy Land Uncovered, only on I-24 News.
Israel Elections 2022. Join our live coverage on I-24 News, websites and apps, free of charge. Live reports, updates, analysis, all from our studios in Tel Aviv and across the country. From the voting ballots and up until the results. Watch us free of charge, only on I-24 News. Welcome back as we continue our political debate here now with Michael Kliener, from the affiliated with the Likud party, former parliament member for Likud, and of course Jeremy Saltan on the Bayit Yehudi, the Jewish Home party list this time around. So we're talking about the right side of the spectrum here, but I want to talk largely, we introduced this right before the break, the threshold concept here, that since 2014, this electoral reform that now raised the threshold to 3.25%, the intention to stabilize politics. I'm not sure we've had a really stable election outcome since that point. So we can discuss that, but the bottom line is all the action now is at these thresholds. Your party's in the center of that on this right side of the spectrum. And looking at who may or may not make the threshold here, is this the right, for lack of a better term, is this the right selection to win or lose at this point, Jeremy, based on who makes the threshold?
I think it is. Look, let's put it this way. The left can't win this election. There's no pathway for Lapid to form a government unless he brings Hadash and Tal in. We just saw this morning a campaign ad by Hadash Tal attacking merits for voting for the Judea and Samaria regulations.
And to say
which
they're
is
polling
come up
right on that threshold as well, so very likely they won't be over that line.
100%.
Right.
Look, if you're looking at merits, Labor, Hadash Tal, Ram,
all on the threshold.
Four parties near the threshold on the left side.
Could be 20 votes, right?
it's enough that one of them fall under, and then you're in a big issue there. But yeah, I think the major issue that Netanyahu has is that it looks like we're having a deadlock. A majority of the polls have it at a 60-60. Not 60 for Lapid forming a government, but 60 forming a coalition with the Arab parties, not for government, but for blocking Netanyahu.
What's Netanyahu saying to your party right now? I mean, looking at you as this party is a critical potential threshold player in this right-wing coalition. What's he saying to your party right now? Shaked, what's he trying to make sure you don't fall off the
Look, I think it's clear. There's also been a number of, Ma'ariv had a few of these polls. When Ayelet Shaked passes the threshold, there's a clear majority for the right wing. When Ayelet Shaked does not pass the threshold, then again, we're stuck at this 60-60 deadlock and a 6th election. And to go to a 6th election in 3 years is just about as ridiculous as having 5 elections.
We're already met. Michael, what do you say? I mean, is the Likud trying desperately to make sure that these guys don't fall off the threshold here, led by Ayelet Shaked?
No, actually, Likud mainly is trying to convince people not to waste the votes on Ayelet Shaked because she's not passing the threshold. In every Likud is a democratic party. Every party has a majority view and has a minority view. I very clearly belong to the minority, and I would wish that Ayelet Shaked would pass the threshold. I believe she has better chances than reflected in the polls. It is not Ayelet Shaked only, it's a National Religious Party, which is a very established party in Israel. Religious people above the age of 55, most of them vote for Ayelet Shaked, and not all of them answer polls. So I believe they have a very good chance, as well as Balad on the Arab side, which everybody says it's not passing. I believe Balad will be the surprise of the election.
Balad's unlikely to partner with anybody.
But it's the same point, and this is a complexity because Balad is rising. So people who are voted for Hadash, for Bshara and Tibi, not Bshara, Oda and Tibi, tend to go to Balad to help them pass the threshold. What can happen? Both will not pass. Balad will not get enough, and Hadash will fall under the threshold. So it's like a sort of gambling.
In the interest of time and on this gambling, we heard Prime Minister Lapid mention this again today, the trials that Netanyahu is facing, the criminal charges, that this being the major stumbling block for him in partnering with the Likud. How significant of an issue are these ongoing trials for former Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Look, one was not reasoned into anti-Bibism, so one cannot be reasoned out of anti-Bibism. Those trials are a shame. They should have never come into being. This criminal count of unreasonable charges. There is a charge against him, which is a breach of trust. Breach of trust is a scandal because the whole principle of criminal law is everybody has to know what is banned, what is forbidden, and what is not forbidden, and then not to breach a trust is somebody nobody can define. It's
Jamie, chime in on this.
It doesn't exist in criminal law
as a factor this time around.
I definitely think that it's a factor. It's been a factor in all of the elections we've had. Ayelet Shaked has said very clearly, of course, that in the next Netanyahu government, she wants to be justice minister. We're not going to allow the trial to be canceled or whatever else, as if
nobody wants the trial to be canceled. This is a lie.
Smotrich wants to cancel the trial.
Both said they are against canceling the trial, and it will not apply on Netanyahu. This is a lie. I'm sorry that you join hands with the left,
Michael,
saying
Netanyahu
said and repeatedly said Netanyahu doesn't want it to be abolished. Netanyahu must be acquitted. He will be acquitted, he must be acquitted, and he will insist on continuing the trial until being acquitted.
So it's not a factor in sort of who he partners with or who he's looking as allies right now, how they view his trial? For Netanyahu, you don't think it's a factor?
No, I believe, of course, the left is, as I said, are using those trials as a political tool. They were born as a tool to harm Netanyahu. That's the reason they were presented at the day when they were the Abraham Accords. So the Israeli prosecution was very keen to run and to the Supreme Court and present charges on the day of the Abraham Accords, which is very much explaining what it was. And one of the reasons Netanyahu is going to win the next election, because the Israeli public understands it, reads the lie, and rejects it.
Jeremy, any response to that? We have to move on.
Yeah, look, I'll go back to the fact that according to the law, if you remove something from the penal code, all existing trials are immediately abolished, and anyone who is sitting time for anything on that penal code is then allowed to, ask to get
so this
a pardon.
Will be changed only after the Netanyahu trial will be ended.
But you're aware, Michael, that if they do that, then obviously it won't be a Cologne situation. Obviously, if you're getting rid of it on the penal code right after Netanyahu in the sentencing, that will also play a factor. To say that getting rid of breach of trust from the penal code of the State of Israel will have zero impact on the Netanyahu trial is just false.
All the things being debated today. I have to cut in. Michael Kleiner, Jeremy Saltan, appreciate you both coming in.
But it should have. If it's indirect,
issues that aren't going anywhere.
If it's indirect, it's justified. If it's direct, it's forbidden.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, David.
The debate continues, and it will continue, probably even beyond this coming election, unfortunately. But thanks for joining us for now, both of you, and we'll keep these issues top of mind for our viewers.